Hello and welcome to Academic. I'm Chris Wood. This is episode 1 of Let's Elm, and we're going to be making a web app. If you want some more information about the web app that we're making, have a look at the 0th episode. Essentially we're talking about setting up Elm and the application that we're going to be making. But I'll cover that a little bit in a second if you haven't watched that. So let's get started. I've already made a Git repository for this. You can see it here. It's pretty bare bones. It's just got a license and Slim README and the standard Git ignore for Elm. We're going to clone this down. Let's open Visual Studio Code. Okay, we'll pull this across here. And we'll open up a command prompt using control and apostrophe. I've set up mine to use PowerShell. Whatever your system shell is, you can have it as that, command prompt or bash or whatever. It doesn't matter. A shell's a shell. So we'll call directory to code and we'll git clone our repository here, and there we go. Let's open up this folder now here that we actually have something in it, and we'll make another new prompt. Okay, just a quick refresher here. We're making an app to recreate this character sheet, basically, and make an interactive version of this character sheet for this game Exalted. And it's got these different sections here. This holds information about the player character. This is a string, these are simple data here. And then you've got this section on attributes, which is physical prowess or whatever, and abilities, how good you are at something. And the interesting thing about these, and why this will make an interesting web app, I think, to demonstrate some of the cool things about Elm, is that it's quite complex data. They're interdependent. So, for example, you need certain attributes to have certain equipment, and you need particular abilities to have certain charms. And everything affects everything. When you buy certain points, it means that you can't get other points, etc. And this means that we need some quite complex validation in the web app itself. But that's fine, because Elm's really good at doing that. So let's move this back here, and let's get started. We want to get something up on the screen as quickly as possible. So we'll call this the Jade Prison.elm, and this is a reference to the game incidentally. That's why it's called the Jade Prison. It doesn't matter. And the first thing we're going to need is we're going to import HTML. We are going to use HTML a lot. And we're going to expose everything. So this is how an import statement looks in Elm. We're exposing everything, so it pulls everything into the namespace here. You can pull specific functions like div, that's one of the functions in here, or whatever. Or you can not expose any of the functions and just import HTML like this, which would mean that you need to do HTML dot whatever div the function, whatever function we're wanting to use. And it's a bit cleaner. I usually like doing that, but actually, because Elm is for making web apps, you use HTML all the time and it just becomes inconvenient. One thing to quickly say, plugins wise, I have the Elm language support here and Elm format. Elm format requires a little bit of a setup, but it's useful. It means to sort of standardize your Elm files. Okay, and so we've got our HTML import here. The next thing that we'll need is the entry point for our app, which is main in Elm. Okay, here's our main function here, and it takes 4 things inside it: init, view, update, and subscriptions. These are essentially the main parts of our application itself. So Elm, we're going to use the Elm architecture. This is actually, I think, the only way that you can make an Elm app now as of version 0.18. That's the version we're using. That's the version you'll need to use for this to definitely work. If you're in the future, keep that in mind. Some things might change. But essentially, it's a model view controller style setup. We're going to add the type annotation here, and this will sort of make a bit of sense. This is type annotation for what's returned from main here. It'll return a program type, which receives never. Now, essentially, this is never is because we're not got any we don't have program with flags. That's another version where you can pass some initial data into the program. We don't need to do that. We don't want to do that at the moment. And then we need the model. It'll return a model. And then the last thing is what's the last thing? Message. That's the last thing here. Okay, so this is the type annotation of this function. And we're going to fill out basically everything that's inside here. And we'll start with the model. It's probably the easiest thing. Okay, so now we've set up our model. This is essentially the part of our program that's going to store the state of our app. So here we're using a type alias. This basically just means, as alias means in English, it is another name for something. So model is a type alias for a record which has a field which is attribute. That's all it is. And you can give it any other record as long as it has a field attribute in it, and it will work just fine. And we give it this name because it makes it nice and clear to see what's going on. Now we have our model, and you can see that our program needs this init function, and we've defined the init. Now that we've got the model, we can do that. So this is the type signature for it here. You can see that it returns a model and a command message. Because we're using program, it expects a command message back. If you're using beginner program, it doesn't take that, but we need to put that here, and we're going to be using commands later, so it's good to do it this way from the start. And you can see here that I'm making a model with an int in it. Essentially, you can define everything in order here. You could, if it has 5 fields, you can just give it the 5 things that it would be expecting to go in those fields, and it'll give you a model. And then we're returning command.none because we don't have any commands at the moment from init. So this model is pretty straightforward. It is going to currently hold one attribute. Now later on, obviously, we've got to expand that to a whole bunch of attributes. But one of the lovely things about Elm is that it's really easy to refactor because the compiler, you've got so many guarantees in a strongly typed language that it's very easy to find out what's went wrong. The compiler will help you an awful lot, which means the refactoring is not too bad at all. Okay, the next thing up, we're gonna start out this view part here. We need to define this view function. Oh, actually, no, we're not. We're going to define this update function. And so for the update function to work, we also need a message here. So let's do that. Okay, so that's us made our update function. And as well, we needed to make our message type before we made our update function, so we can see what's going on here. Now, we're using type here, not type alias. We're not making a name for another type. We're making a new type itself, and this is a union type. At the moment, it's a union type with only one type inside it, this increment attribute type, which is of type message. And essentially, this gets messages. This type message gets passed into the update function along with the current model, and depending on what the message is, we'll update the model in a particular way. So here you can see this case statement, case message of increment attribute. So if we pass in increment attribute as the message, then we'll update our model to add 1 onto it. And you can see attribute is an integer, so we'll just add 1 on. Now I've used this little short syntax here, just to show you how this works. And we can update this one to use the same syntax. So instead of having done, we can give it a list, and so this is quite good because you can give it a list of commands. Again, we might do this later, but it's slightly neater syntax. And so yeah, this just dries it together, but it's essentially the same as defining it like that. Okay, the last thing that we need is the view, and then we can actually make something appear on the screen. Okay, so that's us written our view function. So this is, again, it's pretty straightforward. It takes a model in, the current model that we have, and then it renders some HTML based on that. So you can see here we've got a div element, and this is coming from this HTML module here, and we're putting some text inside it that's with the current value of the attribute. We need to convert it to a string first to pass it to text function so they can render it in HTML. So these functions from this HTML module mirror tags from HTML, normal HTML, and they always have this pattern of attributes and then nodes, so like a list of nodes, a list of attributes, list of nodes. We don't need any attributes on this at the moment, although we're going to add some in a minute. And then you've got a list of nodes here. And so we've just got text going into this one, but it can be other divs or whatever you like. So let's try and compile this. We're going to start Elm Reactor. So basically, Elm Reactor is just quite a nice way of compiling and testing your Elm app as you're developing. So you can see here that if we load up Elm Reactor here, you can see the project. We click on our Elm file and it will build it. And let's have a look. One thing I didn't mention is I ran Elm format there, and so this puts it into like a nice, neat way that Elm should be written. It's still in beta, I think, at the moment, or alpha. It's early on, so it does some funny stuff from time to time. One thing it's done is added this module term up here. And we don't really need this because we're not going to be using anything from inside here in another Elm script, Elm application. So we don't need this really. But then it's just put spacing and other bits and pieces. So here's our app, and look, wow, there's our model rendered as glorious HTML. It is zero, it's nothing, there's not anything in it. So it's not particularly useful. So we need to add something to call our update function so that we can change the value. And for that we're going to use HTML events. Okay, so here's the last part of that we need to be able to modify our actual model. So we've now added a button, again from the HTML library, and then we've added an attribute here, and we've got this on-click event handler basically, which comes from the HTML.events library up here. And we've given it as an argument a message. So when if you click the button, it will send this message to the update function. And then of course when it receives incoming attribute, it will add one to our model.attribute value. And we've just given it the text of plus on the button itself. So let's try recompiling and see what we get. Next, we get to modify our attribute with our little plus button here. One cool thing about the debugger, about Elm Reactor, is it automatically starts this debugger. You can get it other ways, but it starts automatically with Elm Reactor. And you can see here, you can see all of the messages that were sent and the model at the time that message was sent. And you can see the state of the app when it received that message. So that's kind of cool, and it's going to be very useful later when we're adding something quite complex and it's difficult and I break it and don't do the right thing. We can go back and see what's going on. You can export this and share it, which is kind of neat. Anyway, that's essentially the main body of the app. Everything else we're building on top of this framework, and this is essentially the Elm architecture. It's the way that you write an Elm app. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. Next time we're going to increase the complexity of the model, and we'll have all of the supporting gubbins for that. Hopefully we'll be able to get a good part of the attribute section sorted in the character sheet. If you found this video, please like it and think about subscribing so you can watch the rest of the series. Also click the little bell icon so that you get notifications about videos. If you have any comments or questions or recommendations for the series, make them down in the comment section below, or follow me on Twitter and ask there. Follow us on GitHub, fork the source code if you're wanting to make some pull requests if you think that I should change something. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.